the Department of Justice, I have the privilege of working for Carol Mason. I don't even try to keep up with Carol or Denise. They are way out of my league. We are so pleased to be here, though. I'm very, very privileged to be here with this team that we work with all the time that represent many of the federal agencies that are part of the Interagency Reentry Council. This is actually about half of the agencies who are represented, and I go back, for those of you who are in the room this morning, to Mike Thompson's story, and this group is like Mike's son. Everyone is on the step stool, waving their hat, trying to adjust the temperature, looking for all the federal levers that we can to change not only public safety, but also reduce barriers to employment, to housing, to education, to improve access to health care and treatment and benefits. And really the role of the staff group is to look at not only the resources, but our public education platforms, and certainly the policy levers that we've got, and trying to do what we can to hopefully create some tools for you that will be helpful in this work. So at the principal level, this is the Attorney General's Reentry Council. We've got 20 agencies at the table working together. And at the cabinet level, they've met 4 times and have a next meeting in June and are engaging together on this issue. And at the staff level, we are working together, some might say too much, all the time in and out of these issues because we recognize the intersect. And we've tried to put together a very interactive panel where we can very quickly hear from the agencies some of the pieces that are new for the council and that we hope will be useful resources to you. And then we're going to save some time at the end for some Q&A if there are additional questions. And we have no PowerPoint, we have no materials, but we have a one-pager that's out in the back and online, has access to all of our links, all of the Mythbusters, the snapshots, the policy guides, everything we're going to talk to you can access online, as well as the staff roster that can get you to any of the agencies. So with that, I am going to start first on the topic of employment. And Todd Cox, who is the Director of the Office of Communication and Legislative Affairs at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and Todd has been with the Reentry Council from day one, and the EEOC's work here has been just foundational to everything that's followed from this council. So Todd, can you spend just a few minutes making sure that this group knows about the landmark guidance that came out in 2012 and some new resources that have come out from you and from FTC?
Sure. Thank you, Amy, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with all of you today. Well, as Amy mentioned, the EEOC is the federal agency with the lead role in enforcing the nation's laws prohibiting discrimination in a number of areas. Specifically, we enforce Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits employment discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, national origin. And this statute forms the basis for the updated guidance that Amy alluded to. And our guidance relates to the use of criminal records, specifically arrest and conviction records in employment. The updated guidance clarifies and updates our longstanding policy rooted in statutory and case law concerning the use of arrest and conviction records in employment. It is designed to assist employers, workers, and job applicants in understanding their responsibilities and rights under the law and help employers ensure that their workplaces are both safe and fair. I'd like to emphasize a few points to sort of summarize the guidance in the brief time that we have. First of all, neither Title VII that I mentioned before, nor our guidance prohibits employers from considering criminal history when they make employment decisions. The guidance simply describes how employers can responsibly and appropriately consider criminal records or criminal history in a targeted, fact-based way so they can avoid Title VII liability. It's consistent with, frankly, how employers have been doing this for a long time. It also reiterates that for many reasons, and I think probably alluded to in many of the discussions today, that an arrest standing alone does not establish that criminal conduct occurred, and an employer should rely should not rely only on an arrest to make an employment decision. And these are for obvious reasons. First of all, arrest records are not always reliable, but also most importantly, an arrest does not indicate that a crime actually occurred. It's not. Doesn't have the same indicia that a conviction has. What should an employer do? Well, our guidance talks about the employer considering three factors. First, the nature of the job that's being discussed, the nature of the crime that was committed or the nature of the offense, and then finally, the amount of time that's elapsed between the job application or the employment circumstance and the time that the actual crime was committed. And we know that the smaller that time frame, the less likely the person is to recidivate. We also encourage employers to consider having an individualized assessment. And what we mean by that is engaging the employee or the job applicant in a conversation to find out exactly what went on, find out the circumstances of the arrest or the conviction, to offer an opportunity for the person to explain and perhaps even mitigate mitigate the circumstances that occurred. The point behind the guidance is that permanently excluding people from the workforce because of contact with the criminal justice system is not consistent with Title VII, and that it's important that people have an opportunity to apply and be considered for jobs for which they are qualified and for which criminal records are not relevant or predictive. Now, Amy alluded to outreach. We're doing a lot of outreach in the wake of our new guidance, and we have a comprehensive program in this regard in place to educate employers and workers about the applicability of the updated guidance, and it covers both the private and federal sectors. In the year following the adoption of the guidance, we've had 500 events reaching over 45,000 people. And since the release of the guidance, we've, I think, seen some success. There was a recent survey that said 88% of respondents who were employers have actually adopted the best practices of our guidance on the use of criminal backgrounds. And that's compared to 32% that had done so in the survey results from the year before. In addition, we have seen over the course of the year or so that several companies have adopted or announced so-called ban-the-box policies, where they will sort of push back the consideration of arrest and eviction records or criminal records at the end of the hiring process or at the near the end of the hiring process. And of course, that's a policy that we allude to in our guidance as being something that is a good thing and is something that we fully support. Most recently, we've developed a new tool in conjunction with, or in partnership with, the Federal Trade Commission, and that came out in March 2014. Both the EEOC and the FTC co-published 2 technical assistance documents that explain how agencies our agency's respective laws apply to background checks performed for employment purposes, including the consideration of criminal records. And one document is for employers, and the other is for job applicants and employees. And it's readily available online on both our websites, and the links are on the documents that Amy alluded to in her speech. We're hopeful that this new document, as well as the outreach efforts of all of our partner agencies, will really help educate employers about the proper use of criminal records in employment. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. We're going to hear next from Jackie Freeman, who heads up the RecSo work at the Department of Labor. And Jackie's not only been integrally involved with the Reentry Council, but has been working with BJ long before to make sure that our Second Chance grants and Department of Labor's RecSo grants really work in tandem to be helpful to the field. So Jackie, tell everyone a little bit about some of the incentives that are in place for employers who hire and some of the resources that you've got for applicants out there.
Great, thank you, Amy. The Department of Labor has 2 major incentives for employers, and that can help you as service providers to encourage employers to hire those persons that have been previously incarcerated. The first is the Federal Bonding Program, which hopefully many of you know about. This bonding program has been in existence and under the umbrella of the Department of Labor since 1966. What it does is to establish fidelity bonds for those at-risk populations or people or populations that they feel may have some type of liability to the employers. The bonds are absolutely free for employers and the participants. They cost about $98, and the payment for the bonds is taken care of by the state. But they are purchased for a specific individual to go to work for a specific employer. It will bond them up to $5,000 per bond, but the person can be bonded for up to $25,000. That covers them for the first 6 months of employment. By that time, they would have had a great relationship with their employer, hopefully, and the bond would not be needed anymore. If a bond is required past a 6-month period, an employer can then purchase the bond at a competitive rate. And what the Department of Labor does is to oversee that program for bonding. Now, it's been very successful. Over 47,000 bonds have been issued, and less than 1% we've had to pay out on, been paid out on. So you can see that it really is a responsible population that these bonds are going to cover. And we're very happy with that program. The next program we have is not currently funded. So I'm going to have a little disclaimer here, but I want to talk about it a little bit. It's WOTC, our Work Opportunity Tax Credit Program. This program previously has had periods of time where it has not been funded, but then it is funded, and it is funded retroactively. So that's my disclaimer. The maximum tax credits range from $1,200 to $9,600 per person. And what this does is incentivize employers to hire those at-risk populations of which previously incarcerated individuals are part. This can be a huge incentive for employers. The IRS pays out in credits approximately $1 billion in tax credits per year under this program. There are employers that I know of that go around the country trying to find these at-risk populations so that they can hire them to get this tax credit. That's another piece of incentivizing them to their bottom line. So these are two things that we offer at the Department of Labor, and we hope that you will use these two programs.
Thank you, Jackie. And they also have many, many resources and grant programs in the area of reentry, which are all, when they are open online and advertised through the National Reentry Resource Center. Sarah Bard is next. She is with the Small Business Administration. She's the Director of the Faith-Based and Community Initiatives, and going to talk to us about entrepreneurship resources.
Thank you, and thank you to so many of you who traveled from great distances to be here today. So the SBA is the agency that helps America start, grow, and sustain their businesses. Entrepreneurs create 2 out of every 3 jobs, new jobs in the economy. And small businesses are the engine behind our economic recovery, and they're fueling our growth and moving forward. SBA provides capital, contracting opportunities, consultation through 60 district offices, hundreds of counselors, and thousands of mentorship leaders across the country. At the SBA, we're working to build an American small business landscape that encourages access and inclusion. And we know that helping entrepreneurs and promoting entrepreneurialism as a career and employment option is one of the best ways to do that. And we all know that one of the leading factors for recidivism has been great difficulty in finding a job. And even if you are hired, you'll earn 40% less than someone with similar experience and no record. And individuals who are reentering possess incredible training, skills, and talents across a diversity of sectors. And they have much to contribute and offer to our economy and to their communities. And as daunting as it is to start a business, what we do here sometimes is many people who are formerly incarcerated and have these skills will face fewer obstacles in the process of starting their own small business as a sole proprietor, LLC, corporation, than the process sometimes of applying for employment. And we know that as this is one of the leading factors, we're partnering, and so SBA has partnered with a number of community networks and grassroots faith-based organizations to help deliver some of our core training modules to promote entrepreneurialism to those who've been formerly incarcerated. And I wanted to give 2 examples of where we're working on that right now. I couldn't find the Wyoming table, but if you're back there. So in Laramie, Wyoming, our Women's Business Development Center is working with local nonprofit Yin Industries to focus on women who are currently incarcerated and formerly incarcerated to provide training, technical assistance, and marketing for women who are engaged in the craft industry. And the SBA is helping by providing business planning workshops, skill development, and personal financial management. And then in Georgia, in a partnership, SBA partnership with the Urban League, we work closely with 2 programs that assist individuals who've been incarcerated in the juvenile justice or adult criminal system. And we've partnered to provide a series of trainings covering a range of topics relating to starting, operating, growing, and sustaining a small business. And those are just two examples of some of the more formal partnerships and the partnerships that we know of. But we are eagerly sharing our resources throughout our federal agency partners, throughout our community partners, and we hope that you will also share it, take a look at it and share it with your networks. Our training is free, it's online, it's accessible, and it's one of the best products that we offer. And it also gives guides as to how you can connect towards in-person counseling resources. And over the coming months, we are looking at developing a more specific curriculum and training materials to address some of the more specific needs for reentry. And we're very excited to do this, and we hope to work with you as we develop this product, and then we hope you will help us make this a success and impact the next generation really of business leaders. So we're very excited, and thank you, Amy, for including us today.
Thank you, Sarah. We're going to pivot now to education and to John Linton, who's the Director of Correctional Education at the Department of Education. And John is going to talk about some of the a landmark study that Carol mentioned by the RAND Corporation that Second Chance funded, and what it means for the Department of Education.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate that. I wanted to make it clear that I'm not the Reentry Council member. The Reentry Council member from the Department of Education is Secretary Arnie Duncan, and he's very personally committed and has perfect attendance at the council meetings. But it's been my privilege to support him with some of that work. And it's been an interesting year. The Attorney General made reference to a number of studies which we think are very significant in terms of informing our knowledge and informing our practice in terms of looking at this very important area of reentry that affects so many important aspects of our national life. Not only individuals that are directly affected, but the children of those individuals and our communities and our national welfare, and our standing among the nations of the world in terms of how we protect the freedom of our citizens. The RAND study was very validating in the sense that we've always felt that correctional education really would have an impact on post-release success. And the RAND study was a very significant investment and a meta-analysis of research over more than 20 years. And the RAND Corporation, which received that funding competitively from the Bureau of Justice Assistance, worked with the correctional educators across the country, worked with us in the Department of Education, worked with the research community in a broad sense to really make sure that they had a full understanding of the implications of the research that's been done to date, and also to get a good understanding of what we know about current practice and what the promising areas are. So we learned that correctional education can have an impact on post-release outcomes. We learned that correctional education is cost effective. They estimated about a 1 to 5 return on investment for expenses for educational programs during the period of incarceration. Unfortunately, we also learned something somewhat challenging and discouraging, which is that we've been disinvesting, and that individuals that are incarcerated in our prisons today have less opportunity to participate in education, to achieve their educational goals and objectives than individuals we had incarcerated just a few years ago. So we've taken away from that not only the need to continue to improve our educational programs in the institutions and strengthen those programs and improve our knowledge of what really is effective in terms of operating those programs for which individuals, but we've looked more seriously at making connections between the education programs during the period of incarceration and post-release opportunities. So I'm really glad to be able to speak to you that are working on these reentry programs. And I'm going to be very brief because I have an opportunity tomorrow with a workshop and we'll be talking about this in a little more depth. But we do have a model for reentry education programs. We're trying to work with some grantees to demonstrate that model and to find ways to improve and strengthen that model. And we're very pleased to have been funded in the President's 2014 budget to expand that demonstration program. And one other theme that I just want to mention before I stop from the RAND study is that we really need to look at opportunities to use technology more effectively to strengthen our educational programs in corrections, and also to combine our efforts with education with other aspects of release preparation, so individuals have access to the information and resources that they need to do the hard work of pre-release planning so that they can be effective during the reentry process. We think there's a lot of opportunity to use technology to make the connections I mentioned a moment ago between the education programs, pre-release and post-release, and that we really have an opportunity to strengthen the availability and our intelligent use of technology resources in the institutions to strengthen the reentry programs. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, John. We're going to now turn to Linda Melgren at the Health and Human Service Agency. She's with the Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation, but HHS covers so many areas, and Linda has been the spoke in the wheel for the Reentry Council efforts. Right now, she's going to focus a bit on health, a small thing called the Affordable Care Act was implemented recently, and if she can just briefly touch on what that means for the justice-involved population and point to some resources that could be helpful to you.
Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I really appreciate the fact that all of you are here sitting in this room, because the goal of the Reentry Council and those of us at the staff level who support council activities is really to make your job easier. So, you know, we're really interested in getting some feedback to you, from you, about what the federal government can do differently and better to make your life easier. And so, you know, thank you for being here. I think the whole issue of the importance of the Affordable Care Act for the criminal justice population was really aptly covered in the plenary sessions this morning. I was really pleased to be able to be here and listen to Acting Director Michael Botticelli talk about, you know, the fact that access to health care, especially for those people who are have behavioral health issues, is really one of the most important changes in the way we can think about behavioral health and behavioral health reforms in the last couple of decades. And a couple of weeks ago, Associate Attorney General Tony West spoke at a conference, and he talked about, you know, the absolute importance of health care and its underpinnings in terms of linking public safety and public health. I don't think that I need to in any way say much about the strong commitment that President Obama and my secretary, Secretary Sebelius, have regarding implementation of the Affordable Care Act. They have been stalwart defenders. We made a few stumbles that people might have heard about, but now that the accounting is in, it looks like implementation of the Affordable Care Act is on solid footing, and that we are really moving forward. And that means we have an opportunity, as we look towards this next enrollment period, of really thinking about how to reach out to those populations who may be out of the mainstream, who may not yet have gotten into, you know, sort of the systems that allow for enrollment. And that's going to be the exciting work, I think, of this second year of implementation of the Affordable Care Act. So let me talk just a second about resources that are available to you. And I wish I could say there are pots of money out there for the asking. You know, this is the federal government, these are lean times, you know, that isn't the reality. But I think there are resources that can really help those of you in the field get the clients that you're working with enrolled in the most appropriate health care for them. And I think the good news is that for those of you working on the reentry end, that is working on probation and parole, people maybe in home confinement, There are no special rules for getting the folks you're involved with enrolled in the Affordable Care Act. They are just a part of the population that we're reaching out to. So you've got partners, that you can work with in your community who are enrolling vulnerable populations in the Affordable Care Act. People might know them as navigators or personal assisters. They are usually funded through sort of helping social services agencies in the community, but their job is to get the people that you serve enrolled in the Affordable Care Act. So I really encourage you, if you've not reached out, to folks in your community who are doing that work, that is your first set of resources that you need to be reaching out to. And on the healthcare.gov website, there is a mechanism for finding out, sort of where the navigators and those kind of people are in your state, that can help you do this work. The second set of people that you need to reach out to are your local and state Medicaid agencies. They're necessary partners because, there are Medicaid policies that can make keeping people enrolled in Medicaid if they're currently eligible and getting people enrolled in Medicaid if they're not, while they're in the correctional systems, that is in jail or in prison or in halfway houses. There are policies that make it easier or harder to get them enrolled, and your Medicaid agencies are sort of in charge of those policies. And I'm talking about things like, when can you enroll someone in Medicaid prior to release? Whether or not your state has policies that suspend versus terminate when somebody is in an incarcerated, is in confinement. Those kinds of policies are not set at the federal level. Those are set at the state level. And so you, as the community interested in getting people who are justice system involved, need to be working with your Medicaid agencies at the state and local level to make sure that those policy options, sort of are both understood and hopefully changed, if that's necessary, in order to be more responsive to the population. It is also through your state Medicaid agencies that you might be able to access some Medicaid financing to actually get help to have your staff enroll people in Medicaid. I can't give you the details on that. There are 54 jurisdictions, and every single one of them sort of operates a little bit differently, but those Medicaid resources are available. And then lastly, the other set of resources that you need to reach out to are your community health partners. That is, your federally qualified health centers and other community providers that are providing care to this population. The FQCHCs, one of their jobs, in this initial period and for the foreseeable future, is to make sure that every person who walks through their door who's eligible to be insured gets insured. That's part of their mandate. So, your conversation with them about making sure that the people that you work with, who are probably relying on many of those kinds of community health facilities, that you want, to actively engage in figuring out ways of getting your population enrolled. There are a couple of resources that, and I just want to keep this simple. Healthcare.gov is, in fact, a very valuable resource. There is now a special page on healthcare.gov. You can access it just by typing in incarceration. That talks about some of the special rules having to do with individuals who are still in confinement, but also talks about, who is eligible to be enrolled through the marketplace. the National Reentry Resource Center, we are trying to make sure that they have, and they do have, all of the documents that HHS produces sort of up on their website or links to them, so that anything that HHS produces you can find there, and you don't have to know the alphabet soup of agencies that even I can't remember after 30 years of working for HHS. And then sort of lastly, another website is the cms.gov website, which has a whole set of materials both on Medicaid and on the marketplace that can be immensely helpful. Lastly, I just want to reiterate is that this job of enrolling justice-involved people in healthcare can be done, but it can only be done in partnership with the health agencies and human services agencies in your community. And so I really encourage you all to think about those kinds of collaborations and how you can strengthen them and make them more viable and hence get more people access to the health care that they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I just want to reiterate too what Denise mentioned this morning, that second chance grants can be used for activities that help get people enrolled and get these systems in place. And also I see Danica Binkley down there from BJA, who oversees the health portfolio and is working very closely with second chance grantees and others. So we do want to help connect the dots there where we can. Next up is Stacy Rogers, who is Senior Advisor to the Commissioner of the Social Security Administration. And she's got some exciting news about resources that are new to SSA, and also, I think, a deep commitment on behalf of the Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Amy, and good afternoon, everyone. It is indeed a pleasure to join you today and also to be a part of the reentry work at the federal level. Coming from the state and local level myself, the vast majority of my career is actually in state and local government oversight for child support enforcement and other public welfare programs. At Social Security, what we are focusing on in terms of our work to support individuals reentering the community is access to information, also smooth transition, and in cooperation with our reentry partners to ensure that integration of access to benefits. Our subcommittee that works on benefit access, we've looked at how we can work together more cohesively and collectively regarding the various benefits that are offered. And among the partnering agencies, there's a myriad of benefits, programs, and the dissemination of accurate information vis-a-vis the internet, our agencies. But how do we do that in an efficient, effective manner where people can receive that information, whether it's the individual returning themselves or their families? And for us at SSA, we touch so many people. SSA serves 60 million people. Here's some side conversations for you. 60 million people, and we distribute $60 billion in benefits to the community in terms of local community. So it's very important for us as individuals are returning to the community, if they were eligible and receiving benefits prior to incarceration, that they can quickly have their benefits reestablished. But more important is the Social Security card. We recognize that the Social Security card is such a critical piece of identification and what they need to re-enter the workforce, and just for a myriad of other uses. So our focus is in trying to work as closely with institutions and with returning individuals and individuals who are helping people to get their credentialing. So we took on over the last 2 years 2 projects that our acting commissioner, Carolyn Colvin, who is also from state and local government, we made a commitment to look at our own information, the accessibility of that information on our website, and we reconfigured. We had lots of great information, but it was not easily accessible. So we wanted to bring all of our information together. So we launched a dedicated reentry page, which I hope that you all will take the opportunity to visit. And the page is what you need to, benefits after incarceration, what you need to know. And you can access directly access this page at www.socialsecurity.gov/reentry/. We're also working a little bit on it coming up as the top choice when you use Google or even when you search on our page, so you can quickly access the page. One thing we're pleased to know, even since its launch, we've had 48,000 visitors to the page. So we know folks are helpful in getting the word out. The second thing I just wanted to quickly say is that we are also working with facilities across the country. We did an inventory of all of our agreements, reentry agreements with facilities, and this year we are trying to standardize those agreements so that the delivery of reentry services is consistent across the country and within states. We have some states, we have 31 statewide agreements. In other states, we have individual institutional agreements. Our goal is to move toward more statewide agreements where we can, and also to move verbal agreements to written agreements so that you can know what to expect in terms of reentry services. The feedback we get is that the service is great in some places and with some facilities, but not so great in other places. Our goal is to make it a good experience and consistent across the country. So those are the two things we're working on. Again, we hope that you'll visit our website, give us feedback, and if there's any way that we can be of assistance to you in working with individuals returning to the community, we're more than happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. And the new website is on the one-pager that's outside and online. The Social Security discussion, though, is a real reminder of the limited incomes of this population and the need for realistic child support orders. And so with that, I'm going to turn to Adrian Nodi, who's hidden down there, Special Advisor to the Director there in the Child Support Enforcement Office at HHS, who also has a very new resource to share with you.
Thanks, Amy, and thank you all for being here and for all of the work you do to support parents, families, and their children. We know that if parents leave incarceration with a large amount of child support debt, that's a real barrier to reentry. It's a barrier to finding a job, it's a barrier to economic stability, and it's a barrier to family reunification. So one way to avoid this debt is to make sure that parents who have child support orders have a realistic child support order based on the actual ability to pay. So although state laws and policies vary tremendously, in the vast majority of states, parents who are incarcerated are able to ask for a change to their child support order while incarcerated. The key point is that you have to ask, that child support orders don't stop automatically when your situation changes. So it's important for parents to seek a modification or review of their child support order as soon as their situation changes. So the resource Amy mentioned, in order to help parents navigate some of the state complexities at the federal office, when working with the Reentry Council and the Child Support Subcommittee, we created a new resource available on the OCSC website called Changing a Child Support Order, a state-by-state guide. And it's designed for parents, people who work with parents who don't know much about the child support system. So there's a brief overview, about 20 pages, that explains some underlying principles about how child support is established and how orders can be changed. And most importantly, it provides all of the contact information for every state and local child support office. So in addition to the main guide that's about 20 pages plus an appendix, there are 54 state and territory modules, and each state is between 2 to 10 pages. They all answer the same basic questions concerning how you contact your local child support office, what if there are any barriers to change your order, it talks about those barriers, and if there are any special rules for re-entering citizens, it goes over that as well. So I encourage you to check out that new resource. It's available at acf.hhs.gov/programs/CSS chapter.gov/resource/reentry. Don't worry, it's on the one-pager, and like John, I'll be on a panel tomorrow, so the PowerPoint on your flash drive also should have the link in it. I also want to mention that following Stacy's leadership, we did reorganize our website, so now there is on the federal child support page a reentry page that links all of the child support resources in one place. So thank you.
Great, thank you. We're going to stay with the issue of children right now and turn to Eugene Schneeberg, who is the director of the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. He dual reports to the Department of Justice and the White House, and he leads our fatherhood initiative, youth violence, reentry, but also co-leads the work on children of incarcerated parents with HHS on behalf of the Reentry Council. What are we doing in this area?
Thank you, Amy. I want to start off by sharing a couple numbers with you all and then asking a few questions. The first number is 2.7 million. Second is 1 in 28. The third is 1 in 9. And 2.7 million represents the number of children today that have a parent who's currently incarcerated. And 1 in 28 represent the number of children in this country on a daily basis who have a parent who's incarcerated. And 1 in 9, the number's as high as 1 in 9 for African American children. By show of hands, how many of you all work with returning citizens who have children? Okay. Nearly all of you. How many of you have children of your own? And I want you to think for a moment how your children's lives might be affected if you made a poor decision and ended up incarcerated. What would the effect of your incarceration be on your children? Throughout the administration, for the past 18 months, convened by the White House Domestic Policy Council, various federal agencies have been convened to look at how, as an administration, we can improve outcomes for children who have an incarcerated parents. How many of you are familiar with the work that Sesame Street Workshop did last year, rolling out new curriculum for children? So we were proud to be part of that work and actually roll that out at a White House Champions of Change event last June. If you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to look up the information. It's quite remarkable, the job that Sesame Street did. And I know it's probably not proper to, while the panelists are talking, to be looking at your smartphones or your tablets, but I want to break away from that and give you permission to pull out your tablets, pull out your smartphone, because I really want you to take an opportunity to look at the web portal that we've developed for children of incarcerated parents, and you can find it just by going to findyouthInfo.gov. That's findyouthInfo.gov. And when you go there, you just click on the Children of Incarcerated Parents tab. There you'll find a whole host of information and practical resources that I think will be helpful and useful to you all who are looking to better serve that population. Throughout the administration, each of our agencies are looking at this issue of children of incarcerated parents, how we can change policies and programs to better take in consideration the unique needs of children. I want to point out particularly the work of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, as they have prioritized serving parents and serving children, and hosted for the first time Universal Children's Day within many of their facilities earlier this year, where thousands of children had an opportunity to engage with their parents. Also want to thank my colleagues at the National Institute of Corrections, who are funding a study on video visitation and how to best roll that out in a way that best strengthens and supports families. And we have information available on the National Institute of Corrections website to that end as well. We have on that site, findyouthInfo.gov, we have a host of information toolkits for child welfare professionals as well as federal prison staff. I want to thank the Bureau of Justice Assistance, who has been making strategic investments to fund programs. Many of you, I think, are funded under a category that supports reentry to returning mothers and fathers. and more recently, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention is making almost $8 million investments in this area. So I'm going to kind of cut my remarks short because we're really excited about hearing questions from you. So thank you.
Thank you, Gene. Everyone now put your smartphones away, because Ron Ashford's going to speak from HUD. He's the Director of Public Housing and Supportive Services. He has been our champion at HUD, and he's going to talk about tearing down barriers to housing.
So I know, I don't even have to ask for a show of hands. If I were to ask you, what are the major barriers that the people you work with face, you would say housing. I know that. We know that. So I want to talk about some of the things that HUD is doing, and then I want to end up with a request, right? The first thing we did was we sent a letter out to all public housing authorities, signed by our secretary, signed by our assistant secretary for public housing, clarifying what HUD rules are. Because a lot of housing authorities feel that HUD has said, you know, for example, if you've ever had a drug arrest, you can never come into public housing. The letter said basically that HUD's policy is there are two categories of folks who are barred permanently from public housing. One is maker of methamphetamine on the property, and the other is if you're on the sexual predator registry, right? Those are the only two categories of folks. Everything else is left up to the local housing authority's discretion, right? So in Sean Donovan's letter, he didn't just clarify the policy, he also said, we encourage you to be expansive where appropriate, right? We encourage you to do that. So that's one of the things that we did. And then we translated that letter into a Mythbuster, so that Mythbuster is also out, and I hope that some of you have seen the Mythbuster that deals with public housing. The other thing we're doing is lifting up what a lot of housing authorities are doing, because some housing authorities have developed innovative policies, innovative programs where ex-offenders are coming into public housing or using Section 8 vouchers. So we have dozens of those housing authorities who are doing this: Oakland, Burlington, New Haven, St. Louis, etc., right? And I would actually ask you, because we don't know, we have 3,200 housing authorities, we don't know where all the innovative programs are. So to the extent that you're working with a housing authority that's doing something really innovative in terms of some strong relationships with you, I'd like to know that so that we can include that in some of the things we do. The other thing is we're looking at and we're following some studies. So New York City and Chicago are both about to launch, excuse me, very big studies where ex-offenders are being screened by community-based organizations and then are coming onto the lease with family members. So, and they're going to look at that and say, did being on the lease make a difference? So we're following that as well. The other thing we're doing is Department of Justice, and if you follow the budget, you know that Department of Justice got $5 million for a pay-for-success model, and we're working with Department of Justice for permanent supportive housing, $5 million pay for success. We're working on that. We're trying to form that. What does that look like? And you'll be hearing more of that as we move forward. Lastly, excuse me, I apologize. Lastly, we know that you are in cities that have public housing authorities. We want to help you open up that door to the extent you want to open that door. If you're working in Wichita, I don't know if there's anybody here from Wichita, and you want to talk to the housing authority, you want to develop a relationship with that housing authority, please see me afterwards. I can't make that relationship happen, but I can open up that door so that you can sit down with the housing authority executive director and talk through what you're doing in your program and how to make that work. The last thing, because that's what I was supposed to talk about, is collateral consequences. So collateral consequences, what we're doing is, what are the extra barriers that are faced by returning citizens when they come out in the HUD world? And in the HUD world, obviously, it has to do with occupancy. So we're looking at various guidance pieces that we can send out. For example, a lot of housing authorities say if you've ever been arrested, you can't come into public housing, right? So we are looking at that. We're going to send guidance out on that. We're going to send guidance out on about 3 or 4 different pieces to let housing authorities know, on arrests, conviction, time, administrative violations. For example, if you're on a parole and the regs allow housing authorities the discretion to say, if you have a violation of your parole, you can't come, this is grounds for being removed from public housing. Well, sometimes the violation is you didn't pay your fee, right? So should people be thrown out because they didn't pay their fee? So we're putting out some guidance on that as well. So that's what we're doing with regard to collateral consequences. Again, please see me afterwards. If you want to establish a relationship with your housing authority, I'd love to facilitate that relationship.
Great. Thank you, Ron. Next, we're going to turn to Jenni Katzman, who's Senior Counsel at the Access to Justice Office at the Department of Justice, and she's going to talk to us about the role of legal aid in all of this.
Thanks, Amy. I appreciate the opportunity to briefly discuss how legal aid can assist a successful reentry with all of you. First, I just want to give you an overview of our office because we're relatively new. We started in 2010 and were launched by the Attorney General. We're a really small policy group that works to improve the justice delivery system, serving people who are unable to afford counsel in both the civil and criminal contexts. So reentry is sort of perfect because it involves both aspects. And when the AG established the Federal Interagency Reentry Council in 2011, ATJ knew, Access to Justice, we often refer to ourselves as ATJ, we knew we wanted to become actively involved to help remove federal barriers to successful reentry so that people who've already paid their debts to society can compete for jobs, can obtain stable housing, support their children and their families, and can contribute to their communities. Now, you're the experts, you know the numbers, you know how difficult it is for people with criminal records to secure jobs, to obtain housing, and to continue their education. What people don't often know is how legal aid can support these efforts to change all that. For instance, legal aid attorneys can help to clear or mitigate criminal records. It's different in every state. They call it different, have a different name for it. There might be different methods, but it exists in every state. And in that vein, here are some of the things that legal aid lawyers can do. They can expunge, seal, or obtain pardons of criminal records for eligible people, improving prospects for employment, housing, and education. They can correct inaccurate criminal records, such as a failure of the record to reflect an arrest that didn't lead to a conviction, or a felony that was reduced to a misdemeanor, all really important things. They can secure a certificate of rehabilitation to help demonstrate to potential employers, landlords, and licensing boards that an individual with a criminal record is committed to rehabilitation. Legal aid attorneys can help to enforce federal and state consumer protections, mandating accurate and fair criminal history reporting in the commercial criminal background checks sold to employers and landlords. Legal aid attorneys can work with the EEOC and employers to address overbroad criminal record restrictions. Legal aid attorneys can also help to obtain or keep an occupational license so that the person can be employed in the field in which he or she is trained. And lastly, and this is not the last thing that legal aid lawyers can help with, but it's the last thing I will mention, is that they can help reinstate a revoked or suspended driver's license by helping navigate a relicensing hearing, making it possible to secure or to maintain a job. Now, as grantees, you can help to support this work. I know that some of you are already including legal services among the services that will help maximize your participants' success. But for those of you who are not, there's still time, and I would encourage you to consider adding or making adjustments necessary in your budget to do this. I know that's easier said than done. And we at the Access to Justice Initiative recently launched on our website an online toolkit with useful information about how civil legal aid can help to support many federal objectives. And on that, we have a case study for reentry. You can see that. It's a 2-page case study. I think it's really informative. The web address is www.justice.gov/ATJ/legal aid. I also brought copies, but I seriously underestimated the number of people here, so I brought 20. But you can get it on the website. And then I just want to put in last, like a plug for Sharon Dietrich, who is the Litigation Director of Community Legal Services. She's speaking tomorrow at 3:30 on federal, state, and local efforts to address collateral consequences. And she's one of the nation's leading experts in reentry and legal services, and I think it would be really great for all of you to hear from her. Thank you.
Thank you. I think on the Reentry Council website and the National Reentry Resource Center website, there's also a directory of legal aid resources in each state that you can look at too. Last but not least is Mary Griffin, who's the newest member to the council staff group, and she's from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and I will ask her here what I asked her when she found us, which is, what does that have to do with reentry?
Thanks, Amy, and thank you so much for this opportunity to be here and reach out to everyone. As Amy said, we're new to the Reentry Council, and we're new, period. We were established about 3 years ago after something called the mortgage crisis, which many of us know about. We were established to respond to that and respond in a way that helps make financial services markets work for consumers, as well as for companies. And we have a pretty simple and twofold mission, which is we help consumer finance markets work by making rules more effective, by consistently and fairly enforcing those rules, and by empowering consumers to take control over their financial lives. We regulate banks and lenders and non-banks like credit reporting agencies, payday lenders, mortgage servicers, student financial lenders, a lot of people, a lot of organizations and businesses we regulate, and it's a first for many of these to come under federal regulation. So many people refer to us as the financial cop on the beat, and we take that very seriously. In terms of the support we can provide to reentry, part of our mission, as I said, is empowering consumers, and we have heard a lot about a few issues that vulnerable consumers and reentry population specifically, and that is debt, dealing with debt. I'm sure a lot of you have clients who deal with debt collectors. We are recently had an advance notice of proposed rulemaking on debt collection, and we know that you probably also deal with credit reports. We also, under our jurisdiction is the Fair Credit Reporting Act, so we deal a lot with those issues. So we are here to help. Exactly how we help is sort of a work in progress, but we're trying to reach people because we have a lot of people to reach, and we know we can't do it alone, so we're really trying to leverage intermediaries like you, partners. So we want to help you help your clients. The things we have available now for you, when you go to our website, we have something called Ask CFPB. Again, it's a work in progress, but it's a good one. It's basically financial services and products and questions online, and as you're asking the questions, we're looking at how you're asking the questions, and if you start asking these questions, you'll notice they pop up very high on Google. That's purposeful to displace some other financial type entities that might be coming up on Google. We're trying to become the trusted resource in this space so people know where to go and know that the answers they're getting are objective and from a trusted source. How do I get my credit report? How do I read my credit report? How do I fix my credit report? Things like that. What are my rights vis-a-vis a debt collector? How can I make this debt collector stop harassing me? Things like this. We also have a complaint system, and we really encourage you to, with your clients and yourselves, to file complaints if you have problems with financial institutions. This is how we get out there and enforce the laws. We have returned in our few short years more than $700 million into the pocketbooks of consumers because we are really trying to address the problems in the marketplace, many of which caused the problems of the last decade, which we don't want to see happen again. The office I'm with, the Office of Financial Empowerment, is specifically tasked to working with economically vulnerable populations. So we're identifying different populations. We work with on issues dealing with foster youth. We work with on issues with youth in general and people with disabilities, a variety of different groups of people, including the reentry population that we want to work with now. And a few of the things we're doing, we have, again, a toolkit. If you haven't heard anything today, I think your takeaway is that there's a lot of toolkits and there's a lot of tools out there, and they really are helpful. And we're working with legal aid as well as social services agencies to provide these tools through a toolkit. We've already trained 1,400 case managers in a pilot. We're going to put that toolkit into a national rollout this summer, and that toolkit will help your clients address credit reporting, identify and address these issues. So please ask, email me or look to the website. These are just a few examples. One other issue we heard about recently is private student lenders going into prisons and signing folks up. If you're hearing about that, we have an office for students that would like to hear about those issues. And again, there's just a few examples, but please reach out and tell us how we can help you. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Mary. We have 8 minutes. We are happy to take as many questions as we can. And if you have a question, why don't you go to the mic and introduce yourself. While people go to the mic, I just want to say there are other issues that the council is tackling that aren't here at the table. We are tackling juvenile reentry, and you'll hear from Administrator Bob Listenby tomorrow morning. We're tackling tribal reentry, and there is a panel tackling this tomorrow. Women and reentry. The Veterans Initiative is very, very strong, and there's a panel on that tomorrow too. Take the first question.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Newton Sannon, President and CEO OIC of South Florida. And I want to say especially thank you to Jackie Freeman and the Department of Labor for your leadership. We've been a part of the reentry movement of the Department of Labor since Generation 1, so we're thankful for your support in that regard. And to Linda, you said that you'd like to help us and you'd like to hear from us. Thank you so much for saying that. And I think the gentleman from HUD, you're right on when you talk about how can you connect the dots for us at the state and local levels. But I think we should try to formalize that across the board. I think oftentimes at the state level, folks either don't know about the Reentry Council you guys have formed and what a powerful group and consortium of folks, and or don't have the resources to operationalize some of the aspirations that we talk about. So sometimes we don't see the discussions here matriculate on the local level. Perhaps we should consider a formal introduction when the grantees are awarded, and certainly we have an obligation and an opportunity even to introduce ourselves at the state level. But if we got a letter, maybe if you guys tap it into your colleagues at the state level, introducing us as resources to realize these aspirations, I think that would really make our lives a lot more fluid in terms of getting these things done. Last but not least, again, the council is such a powerful group and cohort of folks at the federal level, but again, how do we make sure that we take advantage of one of the voids? And that is, I think comprehensively there's a need to really kind of desensitize the community at large, whether it be the business communities, faith-based groups, et cetera, to working with ex-offenders. And certainly we do that at the local level, but how do we get the notion of this powerful group and the message and the support that you have for ex-offenders and individuals who return from incarceration, kind of a marketing campaign of sorts that you all support this effort down to the local level? I think that certainly they hear from us all the time, but if they saw this statured group of federal groups that also support reentry, I think they would give a lot of leverage to our work on the local level as well.
Thank you. I'm going to give you a very short answer to this. I'm sure Stacy and Linda would like to jump in, but we actually have created, we meaning Stacy and Linda, a very big list and matrix that does try to find the contacts at the state, regional, and even field levels from all of the agencies so that we can introduce them to each other and to you and to orient them to all of these policies and resources. And it is difficult and labor intensive, and we're not yet there, but we have the list and we've started. And I appreciate the comment. We'll really try to move forward on that. Next question.
Hi, Daniel Gibson from Palm Beach County, Florida. Proud recipient of some funding as a community-based provider to do Second Chance Act funded activities. Also a proud recipient of HUD funding. We're a homeless organization that provides supportive housing for the homeless as well. I really appreciate the comments around housing, and I'm just curious what more discussions are happening at the interagency level My fear is that though the $5 million grants that are going to be out there to provide permanent housing are a great start, that sounds like it's going to be targeted for individuals with disabilities. And we have a lot of people who are coming out of incarceration who don't meet that profile, who are still in desperate need of housing. And I also know that there is a national debate going on about the efficacy or the appropriateness of transitional housing versus permanent housing. And I think there's a lot of community-based providers who would argue that for individuals who have been incarcerated for a long period of time, transitional housing still has a great impact and role in our communities. And so I just wonder who else out there is looking at the need to support transitional housing for non-disabled individuals coming out of incarceration. Thank you.
Do you want to take that, Ron?
No.
No. Okay.
Let me just say that the pay for success model is an experimental model, right? How do we get municipalities to pay for the success? It's social impact bonds, et cetera. So that is aimed at permanent supportive housing, right? The transitional model that you're talking about, I work in public housing, and on our CPD side, our community planning and development side with continuum of care, it's more addressed to that, and I think that maybe you and I could have a conversation afterwards in terms of what it is they're doing and how we might better work with that area.
I would also add that Richard Cho is with the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. We are so lucky to have him on our work group because he is an expert in these issues, and he's on a panel tomorrow. So if you can go to the housing panel, talk to Richard Cho, he can really address some of these issues, and he's very much informing our conversations on them. I think this is the last question.
Hello, my name is Jessica. I'm the Director of Operations with Father Matters. My question is for Todd. I wanted to find out, I know that you guys have some guidance tools, but do you have tools in order to allow community agencies to train employers? In the sense of coming differently than just being an employment or staffing agency and building that relationship with the employer, but turning it where you're training and educating the employers and putting them in groups and teaching them how to effectively change policies, change their culture, and things of that nature.
Thank you, Jessica, for that question. Actually, most of our outreach is targeted towards employers, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with our local office in your area that can perhaps connect you with some of the folks in those offices. What we have are, number one, for fee trainings that larger companies access. We also have free trainings that smaller businesses access, and in fact, we're emphasizing small business even more as across a number of our areas, across all of our programs. But the short answer to your question is yes, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with some of our local program analysts who can help you access some of those tools for employers that are interested.
Any last words, Brendan? Yep, Eugene.
I just want to, I think the first gentleman who asked a question about how do you educate and engage the faith community, I want to call folks' attention to page 30 in your program tomorrow, having a panel on engaging faith-based partners. So page 30.
And I just wanted to say, as a utility of our website, because so many people come to the Social Security website, we've placed lots of links. Our partner agencies, we work together on what appropriate links people would want to look at or need to lead them to other federal programs. And we added local and community-oriented links. So our site serves as both the SSA site, but also the conduit to other links. So I hope you'll go out and visit.
Thank you all so much. We value and look to your work and hope to get out to some sites and see more about what you're doing. But thank you so much for